Thank you for joining the latest circuit breaker training module, this one on claiming expenses at individual student programs which require ISP authorizations. My name is Shannon Scully. I'm from the Office of District and School Finance, and we appreciate you taking the time to join us. The agenda for today includes going through some brief guidelines for claiming expenses using ISPs, and then I'll transition into a look at our online claiming system and show you the mechanics of going through and creating placements to claim expenses at these types of programs. Once you're in the online claiming system, on the placements page, you'll see a list of the different types of placements for which you can claim expenses. For this particular module, we'll be covering how to claim individual student programs, ISPs, and you'll see that indicated here with the circle around it. So that's the one that you'll want to choose inside the online system. So what are ISPs? If a student is attending a program that is not on the DESE list of approved special education programs, but has been shown to be appropriate for an individual student, the district can seek an ISP that authorizes the student to attend and the cost that can be charged for that student's attendance at the program. So the district needs to initiate that process by going through the DESE Problem Resolution System, or PRS, online portal. You'll provide some information to DESE through that mechanism, which will be evaluated and, once sufficient, passed along to the Operating Services Division, or OSD, for pricing. Once OSD has taken a look at that and provided pricing, the district will be issued an ISP with the pricing on it for that particular student, authorizing the expenses to be claimed at that particular program for that student. So again, it's a two-step process. You first need to initiate it through DESE, but the ultimate result comes from OSD to provide you with that authorization in the form of an ISP. Once you get that ISP, the program code that will be on that is specific to the school that the student has been authorized to attend, and it needs to match exactly the program code and the placement that you're creating in the online system to claim those expenses. And I'll walk through that in some detail to make sure that your 8-digit program code matches on the ISP and within your placement on the claim. You can also, every district can run a report in the claim system that shows you all of the authorizations that have come through for your system. So there's a list of all of the approved ISPs that are automatically uploaded into the online system, so you'll be able to track what has been approved there. And I'm going to show you an example of that on the next slide. So here it is. Once you go into the system, you'll be looking for a report called My Authorizations. You'll see there's a section that lists all of the ISPs. Below that are other authorizations, including IPAs. You'll see that it has the student and the program that they're attending and the rate information that has been approved for that student's attendance. And I'm going to transition to the online system, and the first thing I'm going to show you is where to find this report in the claim system. So this is what it will look like when you log into the claim system and have gone to your current claim. Here you have before you our fake district Pawnee, and you see that we're working in the FY26 claim for Pawnee. Over on the right, you'll find a caret, a little down triangle caret, and if you click on that, a number of items will appear, and the first one in there is the My Authorizations Report. So this is where you'll want to go to see all of the authorizations that have been issued to your district. So if I click on that, you'll notice a new tab opened in my browser window, and that's going to provide a list of all of the authorizations. So for Pawnee, you see that I have 4 ISPs. Here are the student names in the next column, their SACIDs, and then the authorization name. If I scroll over, it gives you some additional information, including the program, the daily rate that has been approved at this program at the ISP, and the total annual rate that can be charged for services at that school. It also has the start date and the end date for which the service have been authorized to be delivered. I'm going to scroll back over, and the first example that I want to show you is for a student called Sedan Rafaela. So I see Sedan is listed here as the first student, and the authorization is listed here. So it takes the form of A, then a dash, and then 8 digits. If I were to click on this authorization number, it will give me some additional information about that authorization. So I'm going to do that. And here you see it lists my district, Pawnee, the student's name, the program that has been approved for them to attend, which in this case is Landmark Foundation, the dates that they've been authorized to attend, and importantly, the daily rate and the annual rates that have been approved. If I were to hover over the program name here, a program code will appear. This is an excellent way to double check when you're doing your claiming that you have selected the exact right program when you create your placement that has been authorized. So you'll see the program code for this particular landmark school is 003000880. So I'm going to write that down and keep that in mind when I create my placement, which I'm going to do next. I'm just going to hit back on this authorization to return to the full list of authorizations. I'm going to leave this on the tab that was open for me, but I'm going to go back to the initial tab where I see the front page of my claim. So to add these expenses for student Sedan, I'm going to go to add students. I've already added the student to my claim, and you see him here at the top. To get into the student claim, I click on the student SACID. Then I move over to the placements area. Then you see there's currently no placements listed at the bottom for this student, but I want to add one at an individual student program. So I go up here in the placement types, select individual student program, then click next. And on the next screen, I'll be asked to enter relevant information about the student's expenses. So the first you see is individual student program. If I click on this box, it gives me a whole list of a bunch of different schools within the Commonwealth from which I may want to choose. And I could scroll through that list to find Landmark. Or I could begin typing the word Landmark, and it will dynamically start to narrow the available choices to me. So by typing LA, you see that only schools that have LA in them have appeared below, whether they appear at the front of the school, like you see in Lakeside, or the middle of the school, like you see in Curtis Blake. The LA has narrowed my options. So if I can continue and fill out Landmark, you can see that the school is there. And I can click on that. Another way I could have done that, I'm going to clear this selection, is instead of searching by name to make sure that I have the exact right program, I can type in the program code that I had jotted down from before as being the one that's exactly on the ISP. So I've done that here. You see the program code is at the end of this entry, and I know that I'm choosing the correct program here for Landmark. So I'll do that. Now, in looking at my bills, I see that the student has been billed since 7/1 and going through 6/15. The number of days I see on my bills, oh, excuse me, that they're very specific about the format. That needs to be the right year. The number of days that I was billed and the student attended was 220. The placement type, I know this is a day program. And I know based on my bills that the daily rate that was paid was $359.42. So once I've filled in all of the required information, and the items with the red stars are the ones that are required, I could add comments optionally if I had anything specific I wanted to communicate to the circuit breaker office about this placement. But once you've filled out all of the required information, I'll hit next. And the system is going to go and see if it has an authorization in the system that matches this information that I've entered. So it's doing that search right now. And yes, it does. So what came up here is an authorization that it found within the system. And it says here, please select an authorization record from the table below that corresponds with the student's placement. So I see I have the right student. I go over here and I affirm, yes, I paid $359.42. This is the correct authorization, and I would like to associate that with this placement. If you miss this step, you will not be able to submit these expenses with your claim. So you need to make sure that there is an authorization associated with this placement in order to submit the expenses. So I hit next. It tells me my placement has been created. And then I'm going to hit next again. You'll notice it's not here because a final step needs to be to reload this page. So I'm going to go up to the top, and when I reload the page, the placement I just created will appear. And there it is. So now we have the tuition of $79,072.40 for Sedan at the Landmark School, ready to be submitted. I'm going to then now go back to the front page of the claim. And for my second example, I'm going to show you how you need to handle a situation where you're claiming less cost than had been initially authorized. And for this, I'm going to use the student Godric Gryffindor. So let me first go back to the tab with the authorizations in it. And here's Godric Gryffindor. I see that the student has been approved to attend Franklin Academy. And if I scroll over, I see that the daily rate that was approved is $550, and the total for the year is $99,000. If I take the $99,000 and divide that by 550, I know that the student's been approved for 180 days. But when I look at my bills, I realize that the student actually didn't begin until November, so only went to the school for 135 days, so has less annual cost than had been approved. And that's okay. I just want to show you that there's an additional step you'll need to take in order to submit those expenses. So I'll go back to Pawnee and find Godric in the list of students and click on the SACID, go into his placements. There aren't currently any placements for Godric. And I want to again add an ISP placement. I'll click next. He's at the Franklin Academy Day program. So I'll begin to type Franklin and see what appears. And there it is, Franklin Academy. And I'm validating, yes, I know that the program code was 0950030, so that's correct. And although he was authorized to start in September, my bills show he actually didn't start until November. So I will enter the dates of attendance. And looking at my bills, I see that the student attended for a total of 135 days, was a day placement, and the daily rate was $550 per day. Then I will hit next, and the system will try to find an authorization that matches these parameters. And there it is. So Godric Gryffindor is the student. I see that these are the dates that were approved. And I see that the daily rate that was approved is the one that I paid. So that's accurate. And I'm going to click this check mark and I'm going to hit next. Now the next screen is where there's a bit of a change from the first example. Because one or more of the rates for this placement are less than what's been authorized, I'm being asked to please provide a comment to explain. So that's pretty easy. I'm going to say student attended for fewer days than had been authorized. So once I've provided that comment, I'll hit next. This information will be passed along to the circuit breaker team along with your claim, and they'll have an opportunity to review that and ask any additional follow-up questions if necessary. But this says your placement has been created. I will hit next. Once again, it's not appearing here because remember, I need to reload the page. And once I've done that, there you go. There's the placement for the $74,000 for the 135 days that Godric attended this program. For my next example, I'm going to start again back at the front page of the claim. I'm going to go to the Add Student list, and I'm going to scroll down and show you that the student Neville Longbottom has a red issue status indicating that there's a problem with this claim that needs to be sorted out before I'm able to submit the expenses associated with Neville. In order to figure out what is the problem and why is there a red issue status, I need to check out my list of validations to see if I can understand what I need to do to correct the problem. So on the front page of the claim, number 3 here next to add students is something called validations. If I go in there, it will tell me where there are problems. And I do see that there's a validation error for Neville Longbottom. If I look here, it tells me what the error is. I can change the size of the columns just by moving this. And this tells me that I'm missing an OSD authorization for Neville. And it's also offering me suggestion for the resolution, which is to associate the OSD authorization for the expenses in the placement, and tells me that the expenses cannot be submitted without a valid authorization. Further, if I look over here, it tells me this is the placement that is the problem. So you see the placement ends in 719. So I could click on this link and it would bring me directly to that placement. But I also want to show you the longer way to get there so that it's clear on how to find the student's placement. So again, we're looking for Neville's placement that ends in 719. I'll go back to the full student list. There's Neville. I'll click on the SACID. Here I'm also being told that there's an issue, which I'm now aware of. If you go into placements, you can see, in fact, here's the placement with the red issue status. It ends in 719. This is the one I'm looking for to correct. And when I click on that placement name, I go into this details page. This, again, the validations would affirm what I need to fix. It's telling me I'm missing an OSD authorization for this specific placement, and that I need to associate the OSD authorization with the placement. So again, on the placement page, I'm in the details. If I go to the details tab, there's 2 important things to take note of on this page. Again, the issue status is red. It's something we need to correct. If I scroll down to about the middle of the page, there's a section that shows you where the OSD authorization is. It's right here. And you see that the authorization is blank. So this is affirming that there is no matching authorization associated with this placement. To associate the authorization, I continue to the bottom of this page. And down the bottom, it will tell me if any authorizations have come through. So in this scenario, we might have created the placement prior to receiving the OSD authorization. So the placement was created with the red issue status problem. And now I'm going back to clean up that problem now that the authorization has been issued. So again, I'm scrolling to the bottom of the details page and I'm finding that authorization. And there it is. This is the one that matches for Neville. This is what I paid, $479.35. It's now been approved through the ISP process. I'm going to click the button next to it and I'm going to click finish. Then if I go back up to the top of the page, you'll see the issue status has now been cleared, so it is green. And if I go to the middle of the page, you now see that the OSD authorization has been appropriately associated with these expenses. And back on the student claim page, if I look at all of the students, there are no red marks anymore. Neville has turned green. And I can confirm that I'm all set by clicking on the validation tab and seeing that I now have no validations that I need to correct. So those are the 3 examples of how to claim an ISP. If you have any other questions about this type of placement or anything else, please feel free to reach out to your circuit breaker liaison. We're here to help, and we want to do anything that we can to make sure that you're able to claim completely and accurately. Thanks so much.